Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be, someone across our lovely world. One of those big days in the world today, but thanks so much for taking time out from what you're TV viewing and joining us live here for Serverless Office Hours. We are streaming live on the AWS Twitch channel and also on Serverless Land YouTube and also on LinkedIn Live. My name's Julian Wood. I'm a developer advocate for serverless here at AWS, and I'm joined by some experts at eventing stuff and Stripe stuff. Good friend of the program, Ben Smith. How are you, Ben? Welcome back to Serverless Office Hours. For people who may not know you, tell us what's going on in the world of Ben.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben. I'm a developer advocate for Stripe, formerly working with Julian on the DA team for serverless at AWS. And I've been at Stripe now for about 4 months, enjoying getting to know the product, getting to meet the customers, and working closely with lovely PMs like my friend Trey here.
Cool. Well, welcome, Trey, to Serverless Office Hours. First time, nice to have you. So, yeah, tell us how have you landed up doing what you do at Stripe? What's sparked the interest and landed you up here today?
Hey, good to be here. My name's Trey. I've been working 2 years at Stripe now on the product side for doing the developer tooling, developer experience, and throughout my entire career, I've done various developer experience product work for various other startups, and that's how I landed here at Stripe doing the exact same thing.
Cool. Excellent. Sounds interesting. Well, we're going to be talking a lot to Ben and Trey, who are going to be talking about Stripe later on. But just to keep you up with what's going on in the world of serverless, over the past week, last week was serverless testing. So Eric had a good chat to Pavel, who's an AWS serverless hero. Yeah, lots of different interesting concepts all about testing. And that's on our Serverless Land YouTube channel, youtube.com/serverlessland, along with all previous Serverless Office Hours episodes, which is going back years. So plenty of things you can look back on and get up some cool video stuff, video learning. What's new in AWS serverless? We always think it's the roll up to reInvent and it's going to be quiet until reInvent actually happens, but absolutely not. There's still lots of releases that are coming out. So yeah, just looking at 3 of the Lambda ones, we've got a new IDE experience with VS Code. So if you're in your IDE Visual Studio Code, you can build, deploy, view logs, do everything in Visual Studio Code without having to go anywhere else. It's all entirely integrated within the experience. So yeah, download the AWS Toolkit. There's a new functionality called the Application Builder, and it's all available there. Just really makes it simple. Locally testing, set up debug, watch debug configurations with the launch.json. Yeah, huge amounts of stuff there, which is super cool as well. Sort of partnering with that in terms of developer experience a bit further down, there's actually the Lambda console code editor is now based on the Visual Studio Code, the open source version. So that's super cool. If you're using Visual Studio Code in your IDE, it looks now same as in Lambda function. And it's also nice, you've got 2 different panes. So you do an invoke and you can see your results straight over there as well. Also fault injection service. You want to break Lambda and be able to see how that works. You can use that as well, which is cool. And then if you're in the Java world, serialization is always a funky thing you need to get into, be able to wrangling your data. And now you can do some custom serializers with the Java runtime. And then Amplify has been coming out with an even easier way for static website hosting. Amplify does have hosting where you can build and do all your CI/CD pipelines. And now literally you just point it to an S3 bucket, and it doesn't have the build and everything as part of that, but can just host your website. So yeah, that's really quick and easy. A whole bunch of blog posts that have been coming out to talk about these various kind of things. Yours truly has been doing one on the developer experience ones for the local IDE and the in-console. I did mention reInvent. Well, that is coming thick and fast between the 2nd and 6th of December. I know Ben is going to be there. Trey, are you maybe there? Yes, no?
No.
You're making Ben all do the hard work. I love that. So yeah, that's lots been going on between now and then. There are going to be a whole bunch of releases. Promise you I'm not allowed to tell them what you are, even though I'm dying to. But yeah, certainly a huge amount of things going on. Also, remember, we here are live on Serverless Office Hours. So we are live. Please send us your questions, send us your comments. We absolutely love finding out where you're from. So yeah, just tell us where in the world you're coming from. It's always super cool to see where people are connecting from and where our community is. But today we're talking about sort of event-driven architectures and how you can use AWS but integrate with various kind of partners, and one of them being Stripe. So Trey, over to you. Like, tell us, I mean, for people who don't know, what is Stripe and what is the integration all about?
Yeah, sure. Let me share some slides real quick.
cool. And we do have some people we've got some from AWS, Lachabot from Colorado. Thank you very much. And yeah, there's a long-time viewer, Robert Tables, is all about happy about Stripe. So we have your deck up. Thank you.
Cool. So we've been cooking up some nice developer experience upgrades for helping you write better integrations if you use both Stripe and AWS. So just to kick things off, talk a little about what is Stripe. If y'all don't use it or you're unaware of Stripe today, Stripe's a financial infrastructure platform. We help companies of all different sizes move money, providing tools such as helping our merchants accept payments, helping them embed financial services, and enabling custom revenue models like managing subscriptions and dealing with invoices. And as we think about payment flows and money movement flows, it's really important for a lot of our users to develop automations and be very apprised of what activities are happening across their money flows. An example of this is when you receive a payment, you might want to print a shipping label to send out your product, or if you're a subscription business, every time someone upgrades from a trial to a paid subscription service, you may want to give them additional permissions on your platform. And today you do that through receiving asynchronous API events. The only way to do that today is with webhooks, but Stripe just launched event destinations, giving you more options beyond webhooks to consume events. And the first new destination type is Amazon EventBridge. So this will be great if you're already running your infrastructure on AWS.
So Trey, just to jump into, so these are events that Stripe generates as part of just running the financial infrastructure platform. So I suppose when a payment is made or a subscription is created, all these financially kind of events that people can think of, those are events that are generated, and now you can send them directly onto AWS via EventBridge, and then react to those events by doing whatever and integrating with the rest of AWS. Is that the sort of these are Stripe events based on what your, as a payment provider, you can offer, but events based on customer things that are going on?
Yep, that is exactly correct.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Every time something happens on Stripe generates a event object, and you can poll our APIs to receive it. But the much more popular and recommended approach is actually subscribing to those events and having Stripe send those events to your previously webhook endpoints, and now we support with event destinations other places such as Amazon EventBridge.
Okay, so before it was a sort of bit of a polling model, and obviously you've got to have something up and running to be able to poll that, and keep asking, is there any more information? And now you just sort of turn that around and then push the events directly to EventBridge.
Not quite.
Not quite. Okay.
Interject. No, before. So polling is one way of doing it, but before we had a webhook model where you would give your event a public or private URL to call out to. Actually, it would have to be a public URL, wouldn't it, to call out to, which you would then receive and process. So you'd have to stand up that endpoint.
Okay. So you'd have to run a webhook within your accounts and make sure that was up and running and safe and whatever, and do auth and all the kind of things to be able to send the data through.
Yes.
And now just events appear.
Yep, exactly. And with event destinations, you can send your events directly to your AWS account through Amazon EventBridge, just by configuring the AWS account ID, the region you want the events to be sent, and of course you can give it a destination name and description so you can easily manage those destinations on the Stripe end. And once you set all that up, you'll be able to see your events flow right into Amazon EventBridge, and then from there, you can enjoy all the developer experience and event-driven architecture tooling that AWS provides, being able to route events from Amazon EventBridge to multiple different services, such as a Lambda function to do some serverless compute, step functions to kick off some workflow, SNS, SQS to fan out your events across your organization as well. And of course, you'll also be able to enjoy other benefits, such as being able to manage your event lifecycle, from being able to replay events, archive those events, and monitor any events with CloudWatch logs.
Oh, so yeah, so I like the explanation from the Stripe side, but then for people who don't necessarily, from the AWS side, they're like, well, this just works like an AWS event. I do that for all my infrastructure events if I power on an EC2 instance or do anything. And I think, yes, that's the point. You can literally, connect with partners like Stripe and interact with those events as if they were your own application events or AWS events, and they're just there for you. Job done. I like it.
Yeah, and it's really nice with Amazon EventBridge. You no longer have to worry about really managing infrastructure or writing any other custom code to allow these events to flow right into your AWS infrastructure.
And another massive benefit is you typically, if you use this webhook model, you'd have to check that the thing hitting your endpoint is actually from Stripe, right? By looking at certain things in the headers and whatnot.
Yeah.
Once you've configured your partner event bus, your Stripe event bus to send events, you can be sure that it's coming from Stripe, right? So you don't have to stand up a bunch of code to check that that inbound call is actually your Stripe webhook. So that's like massive time saver just in that. You can also do things like transform the event with things like EventBridge pipes, for example. So you can go really deep into all of these different EventBridge features almost by configuration, right, without having to really write a lot of code, which is the whole value add of serverless, right, or one of the many value adds of serverless.
Yeah, because people are used to setting up webhooks and they think, oh yeah, it's easy, it's just a public URL on the internet. But yeah, they're not thinking about the validation of, is this coming because it's a public URL open on the internet. You've got to do a whole bunch of stuff to make sure that people aren't, hacking you or DDoSing you. And then, doing any data transformation as it comes in. Again, it's your own code. It's all that kind of stuff. You've got to manage, upgrade, patch, and all that kind of thing. And use, EventBridge, even input transformations or pipes or that kind of thing, just handles it all for you.
Yep, exactly. But it's probably more fun to actually see it in action. So we have a demo we can show real quick. Let me pass it to Ben, who can walk through the demo of event destinations.
Cool. Let me just send you my bank account details in the private chat, and then we send a few million across, and we'll just do the demo like that, and I'm sure it'll be fine.
Stripe has this fairly new concept of something called sandboxes, where you can set up up to five sandboxes in your account, and those sandboxes can't actually take real payments. So the demo I've got here is a sandbox account. So it looks real, looks like it's taking payments, but it's not actually moving any money around. Right? So,
it was worth asking. I mean, you never know.
Yeah. I've shared my screen here. So this is actually a demo that you've seen, Julian. Let's not pretend you've tried this out in the flesh. Yeah.
Yeah. The green toddler onesie didn't quite fit.
No. This is something I built for a event called Go to Chicago, which is a developer event that runs in Chicago. There's other ones that run in Amsterdam and other cities around the world for developers to come, and great lineup of speakers, by the way, well worth checking out. Maybe you can put the link to that in the chat, Julian. And we wanted something on our booth that would generate a little bit of interest and actually showcase Stripe in some way, right? So we came up with this little demo here, which is a swag store. So we had lots of lovely swag on our booth hidden away. And the idea is that you come up to the booth here and you scan the QR code for the current item that is on display. And you can go ahead and try this. In fact, it would be cool if someone watching would try this actually. Let's see if we can get one of our watchers to try this. So if you go ahead and scan the QR code, that will load something called a payment link. And this is something which completely no-code solution to taking payments for subscriptions or for products on Stripe, right? So,
and by the way, I'm getting a no link available for the.
Let me just refresh the page. Then perhaps that one's expired. Oh God, demo gods are doing it. They're doing it right now. It's happening.
We're live.
Yeah, I think my webhook and my WebSocket endpoint dropped out, which I'll explain in a minute. Try again with this one here.
Yeah, we're good. So
this will take you to the payment link where you can pay for this with whatever payment method, Apple Pay, Google Pay are the quickest ones. Once that payment has been successfully taken, remember it's not actually taking real money from your bank account, what you should see is this will generate an event in Stripe. That event will be sent to an AWS account over a serverless event bus, which, as you can see now, has just happened, right? So it sent an event over EventBridge, which went to a Lambda function, which pushed that out over an IoT core topic using an MQTT WebSocket connection. So what that means is we can update our front end in pretty much real time based on events that are firing off in our Stripe account and being sent to our AWS account over that event bus. And you can see there's people making payments now. That's why it keeps pulsing, right? Every time there's a payment made, we see the confetti drop. So this is just one way of showing that we're capturing payments. Another thing that happens here is that the stock number decrements there in real time as well. And when that gets to 0, this will swap out and another item will pop in. And I just want to, that was a really quick demonstration of what's happening. So I'm gonna go over it with a tiny bit more detail here. Let's start with this one. So this is what's happening, right? You scan the QR code, that loads up my payments links page, which you should see there. That then allows you to pay by Apple Pay or whatever you choose. Once you've gone ahead and put in your card details, that's what generates the event in Stripe. Stripe will then instantly send that to my serverless event bus over EventBridge, which will then route that event to a Lambda function, which will then publish a message onto IoT core topic, which my front end is constantly connecting to. And it's that connection, I think, that had temporarily dropped out because I had this page open all day, basically. So that's what we just saw. We just saw all of that happen in real time, right? It's just one of many examples of how you can use those events that are happening, capture them, and orchestrate those events in different ways. The way I think of Stripe is that everything in Stripe is an object, right? Multiple different objects, and you can manipulate all of these objects and edit them and update them using really great, well-documented APIs. What also happens whenever the state of one of these objects changes, which is pretty much whenever one of the state of the object changes, that generates an event. And it's these events that we can subscribe to understand and react to things that are happening in our Stripe account. I'll pause.
Cool. So yeah, just a perfect event-driven architecture. I think people can see exactly how the flow works. I always think it's fascinating where people see this as an asynchronous architecture with an event-driven architecture, but it's quick. It's not as though you are waiting for ages for the event to go through. The payment is happening really quickly, updating the front end. And this whole world of, we need to use synchronous because it's for the front end and that's the only way we can update our front end. This is doing a whole bunch of calls going via Stripe, via AWS, via EventBridge, via IoT Core, WebSockets, pushing it to your front end, and it's it's still quick. It's certainly usable as a interactive front end application.
Yeah, and this is fairly synchronous, right? We want this to be seen once it happens. So it's not like a typical serverless use case actually, but it, like you say, it still works within a second or so. That first one took a while because we had a cold start on our initial Lambda function invoke, right? Once that was invoked, we were able to see the others subsequently come in almost instantly.
But even in a production environment, you're not going to see that anyway because you're going to have, this is going to be firing all the time. So
right.
Very unlikely. Yeah. And there are going to be lots of ways to reduce your cold starts. So yeah, Tanya, who I'm hoping I know who that is, says EDA for the win. Absolutely.
I wonder if that's Tanya, formerly of AWS, now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully it is. Welcome, Tanya. Nice to see you. Yeah, and also there's some sort of weird things behind the scenes that some people may not realize. And for example, EventBridge actually reduced latency a year-ish ago by 80%. And it wasn't just the overall latency, it was sort of the peak P99 latency, which was much quicker. And so before, yes, you would have this, kind of reactive application. And, most of the time EventBridge would be, sort of, I don't know, half a second or that kind of thing. But every now and again, something weird would go on. And you would have sort of 2-3 seconds before an event would be delivered. So that's annoying on your website and you don't know when it's ever going to happen. And so EventBridge actually did a whole bunch of work behind the scenes to re-architect literally the way events flow within their event-driven architectures. So reducing the latency by 80% and making it much more predictable. And our latencies for EventBridge now, I can't remember the figures, but I mean it is in the low tens of milliseconds. And so you can build these really reactive websites like this, but using an asynchronous pattern, pushing it over EventBridge, and people would think like, that's strange, like reducing EventBridge latency. How would that ever impact my my front end applications? Well, you can build things like this with that kind of use case.
Yeah.
I mean, what people are saying is they're waiting for the swag. That's also the Sean Kendall. Thanks for joining us. I'm here waiting for my swag. We're waiting. Tanya's also getting in on the game. Love sweeters for us all. And then Alpa Codes, thank you for joining us. I'm here for step functions first. So step functions always. So, we're not waiting for the swag, but we've got a bit of a queuing theory going here for some swag.
Well, another thing I wanted to show you, look, this is my Stripe dashboard. So you can see this is real. Like, this isn't just an animation, right? Here's the events that have just
Can you zoom in a little bit, Ben,
today.
just for the old people who...
I've got a massive screen here. Is that better?
Yeah,
so
it's better.
Here's the events or the payments that were just taken in my sandbox. Here's the actual events that just fired, right? So here's the checkout.session completion. And here's the sort of details of that event. And if I drill down, you can see this is Tanya, who's chatting to us on the live chat, right? So she obviously just tried out the demo, and we can see, I hope she doesn't mind me sharing her work email. But there it is happening in real time, right? There's
and so this is just viewing it on the Stripe dashboard, that you're seeing all the things come in. You can immediately see the individual events and then see the JSON payload.
Yeah, this is
cool.
This is Workbench. So this is really for, as you're building, as you're debugging, as you're trying to inspect what's happening in your Stripe integration whilst you're coding, really a sort of developer tool. What you would do then is you would archive and report on all these logs, probably from AWS, right, from CloudWatch logs, because that's exactly what that's for.
Cool, but this is I like this view that you can see everything in one place, and just sort of live tail the events in the console as they come through. Yeah,
this is amazing. You can literally add shell commands to create that event, right, from directly within this CLI. So I can test everything from within my browser once it's all connected. It's really neat way of doing it. Don't have to leave my whole environment. It's all right here.
Cool. Sorry, I've managed to close the screen, which doesn't help when you're live streaming. Back to normal. Okay. Cool. So we've got the events then flowing from Stripe, into AWS accounts, and using a whole bunch of things. And as Tanya says, a whole bunch of things: sandboxes, Workbench, and event destinations all in one demo.
Yeah.
Excellent. Your Christmas bonus, Trey and Ben, are on its way. So, and then people can react and build sort of all kind of other applications. What are the sort of kind of use cases? Obviously, we've just showed, doing payments and this kind of thing. But what other kind of use cases? I suppose that's the question: is what other kind of events are generated that people could then build applications from, or build functionality from?
One of the events that Ben showcased here is the checkout session, which is the checkout page that you saw when you checked out. Another popular event a lot of our merchants rely on automating against is customer.subscription update, an event that tells you if you're using our subscription products, when one of your customers has upgraded their subscription. And this is really helpful, because you can imagine if you're a subscription product, when someone upgrades, you may want to tell them that, hey, you now have access to the platform, and give them permissions. Or if they cancel their subscription, the opposite thing, where you've now lost access and you revoke all those permissions. Another classic example and popular example is also dealing with accepting payments, especially when they go wrong. So we will send an event when what we call a payment intent, has succeeded, but also when a payment intent has failed. And it's very common to alert your support teams that a payment has potentially failed internally, or let users know externally, your customers, that their payment didn't go through, and so they're not expecting the product that they bought to not arrive.
Okay, so that first use case was about subscriptions, and obviously there's a time component to that. So then how would people can see that event in the event on the EventBridge event bus? What kind of architectures can they build, or what can they do, based on that, something that needs to happen in the future?
Yeah, so with event destinations, user would configure their event destination to listen to this subscription event, and whenever that subscription event triggers, they would set it up. They would set up some routing rules on EventBridge. So when that event flows from Stripe, generated on Stripe, flows through Amazon EventBridge, it will get routed to whatever event consumer service that they want to process the event. A common event-driven service would be Lambda. So you might write a Lambda function that manipulates permissions on your account and fulfills these permissions for the customer that just upgraded their subscription. And as you saw in the example, the payload that we sent, that Stripe generates, which is sent to EventBridge and ultimately routed to Lambda, has all that data that you need to do that automation, such as who subscribed, when they subscribed, which plan they might have subscribed to, so that you can fulfill those permissions respectively.
Okay, cool. So that's an example of changing the subscription level from a standard to a pro tier or professional tier or that kind of thing. I'm just sharing the link of the blog post that accompanies this as well, because I remember looking at that as well, and there were some use cases explaining there, like offering a free membership until a set date, and that seems sort of a cool thing of using sort of EventBridge scheduler to be able to do something in the future. So you could have a 30-day trial or this kind of thing, and then I suppose you can just build fairly simply build these kind of event-driven architectures in there, set a future event, and whatever happens in 30 days, it's going to be able to bill you or offer you a chance to cancel the subscription, all those kind of things.
Yeah, and what's really nice about especially these subscription use cases is most subscriptions happen at the same time, maybe the beginning or the end of the month. So you actually end up getting a ton of these events at the same time, and setting up your own infrastructure to handle these events gets a little difficult because you have to manage all the scaling of the infrastructure. But EventBridge is really nice because it just enters a queue and you can process them without worrying about your systems going down with these high volume, these time periods where you may receive a high volume of these subscription events.
Okay. I'm just going to show the blog post because it actually had quite a good sort of architectural diagram, which is worth showing, of how simple it sort of is. Of the free membership, the subscription created event. Let me just zoom in. I can see that's a bit small. Subscription created event, which is something so easy to pass in EventBridge. You use a Lambda function to then calculate the end date, and then you can modify the subscription. That's it seems really easy stuff. And then on to the second one was the flexible part payment for students. Similar kind of thing. And just use Lambda functions to this example, you've got to calculate the schedule.
Julian, sorry,
yes,
something
Ben.
to mention in something to
No, it's fine.
in the second one. I think we've got a delay, or I have anyway. Is so what I like about the second example is that you're capturing your event and then you're using Lambda to call back out to Stripe, right? So it's very simple. You're not like orchestrating Stripe APIs, not really a step functions use case needed here. Only two calls, but you're reacting to one event, you're calling back into Stripe to tell it to do something else, move it along to the next thing, how I think of it. And then you're reacting to that event separately, right? So there's like two different microservices consuming and then producing or giving an output back onto Stripe again. So I really like this use case here, just the architecture of it, I mean.
Yes, that's interesting. So you are sort of using Stripe as its own sort of event bus in a way, and then Amazon EventBridge is also, reacting to those, or receiving all those events, reacting to them, and you sort of, you're doing a workflow, but it's, it's not like a step functions or a Apache Airflow or durable functions kind of workflow, but you do have some workflow functionality you can build in.
And you would, right? If you're doing some sort of fulfillment workflow that takes days or weeks or months, then that's something you would kind of start off a step functions workflow and use the way it builds the state transitions and the amount of time it can run for a year. And you can orchestrate your fulfillment workflow using step functions, calling back into Stripe at those important moments.
Cool. Yeah, so I just, there was, how do you configure the EventBridge? Praveen Alam, thanks for joining us. How do you configure the EventBridge info to send the events?
I think I could have a go at showing that, if that's useful. Let's give it a go. If you can put my screen up, Julian, please. So I've gone back into my workbench here, and I've gone to Event Destinations, the tab here, and I've gone Add Destination, and I'm going to select what event I want to capture or send to my AWS account. I'm going to continue. I'm going to choose if I want to use a webhook endpoint or Amazon EventBridge. So we still have webhook endpoints, right? If you want to stand up your own endpoint using API Gateway or your own backend server, of course you can still do that if you're not using EventBridge. So I'm going to use EventBridge. I'm going to continue, and then the next step is to simply just put in my AWS account ID and my region, right? That will then pretty much instantly generate a partner bus on my AWS account. So this is my AWS account in EventBridge. If I go to my event buses, you can see I've set this up a couple of times. So here is the partner bus that it generated for me. It always has a funny name like this, but it will normally have the name of the partner, whether that be Stripe or another integration. And then what I will do on my event bus is I will start creating rules based on the shape and the look of that inbound triggering event. I will create rules to route them off to my various AWS services. So you can literally set this up in less than a minute, I would say, right? Whereas standing up a webhook endpoint in a backend server and writing the code to authorize the request, like it's a whole other thing. So this is where this really starts to become something that lets you move really quickly.
Okay. Do customers need to think about any authentication? Once it's been set up automatically, is there any rotating credentials or things they need to think about that'll, operationally will catch them out in the future, or it just does its thing?
I don't think so. Trey?
No, it just does its thing. Also worthy of the note, we also have a API to programmatically spin this up as well, instead of using the UI like Ben just walked us through.
Okay, cool. And then Praveen does ask, awesome, quick follow-up, can you do this via infrastructure as code? Well, definitely on the AWS side, because it's just EventBridge rules and targets.
Yep. You can actually do the whole thing via infrastructure as code, given that you can spin up the Stripe side with our API. We're actually targeting to release a CloudFormation template to run through this entire flow in the coming couple of weeks. So that'll be out there in our documentation, which will make setup a lot easier as well.
Oh, interesting. So, is there an infrastructure as code sort of equivalent for Stripe, or is that just is it API done? Yeah, that's the sort of don't think of how the partner story works of setting it up on the Stripe side in an automated way, or is that not needed?
It just uses the API. It uses our Stripe APIs to set up and configure that event destination resource on Stripe.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I would say in the way that AWS talks about infrastructure as code, maybe not. There's not like a like for like way of spinning this up. Yeah. And Trey, won't you always have to go into your AWS console and like authenticate, like for one time only, like authenticate the bus, say, yes, this is my Stripe partner bus? You have to do that, right?
Well, yes, you do, but with CloudFormations, you can do that programmatic.
Okay.
Because
cool.
we'll be able to determine the partner event source that is created, and then you can associate that, do the CloudFormation template, and then see events flowing.
So you would do it in like we did in the dashboard. You would do that with Stripe APIs first, and then you would deploy your CloudFormation resource. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we did have another question from Lion Artist 8080. Thanks for joining us via Twitch. How to handle Stripe's payment events across multiple regions while ensuring compliance with global data residency requirements and minimizing latency for a seamless customer experience.
Yeah, Trey.
Yeah. For multi-region setups, you have a few different options. You could a popular option is setting up each event destination maps to one region. So you could set up multiple event destinations in your account and have multiple EventBridge instances across multiple regions in AWS, and then reconcile those events on the AWS side yourselves. Or I believe EventBridge also has multi-region setup as well that you can just send and enable that on the AWS side.
Cool. And then, yeah, Alpa Codes came back again. Oh, this was when we were talking about different use cases, but like your real-time fundraising, you are updating as people donate or using QR codes. I'm not quite sure what Mercury Rising is, but yeah, actually on the blog post, there is a third use case, which is broadcast tipping events to multiple viewers in real time, which is, I suppose, sort of what you were showing before, using the same, using the IoT core, same kind of thing where you are just broadcasting an event to, I suppose it could be one or multiple people.
Yeah, you're right. It's exactly the same architecture. So that is the event to Lambda to IoT core to massive multi-scale fan out. Very similar architecture for the demo I showed versus like this live tipping idea.
Okay. And interestingly, I mean, this is done with IoT Core, but I mean, there are sort of even newer and more different options to do that as well. I mean, you could use a GraphQL subscription. And in fact, AppSync came out. So AppSync is a GraphQL service, but they actually came out with a whole separate thing called AppSync Events, where you can just route EventBridge events directly to AppSync. Well, not just EventBridge, but any event directly to AppSync. And AppSync will manage a WebSocket connection through to your front end, and there's no GraphQL required. So yeah, plenty of options. I mean, they're ultimately all using WebSockets under the hood in different various ways, shapes, and forms. But yeah, WebSockets is a pain to manage yourself if you've got to handle connections and reconnections and all that kind of thing. So yeah, lots of different services. Just abstract that away and make that much simpler. So yeah, definitely, if the IoT core is a great way to do that. We've used that in many successful applications. But yeah, if you're in the GraphQL world, you can use AppSync with GraphQL. And then also there's now a sort of direct integration with GraphQL, without GraphQL, but using AppSync events. So that's also worth having a look at.
And another really easy example would be the Serverless Espresso demo, right? Where you order a cup of coffee from your phone, AWS Serverless Espresso demo. If you were to add a payment component to that, this demo I showed is exactly how you might do it, right? Where you would, instead of just linking to add your email address or your phone number, I think you have to do, right? You would just go to the payments link. You would wait until the payment's been successful. So you'd wait to capture that that's been successful from the person that's logged in. So you would have to do some authentication against the user that's logged in to the app, right, to make sure the right person's paid. And then you would push that out over IoT Core the same way as we just saw. And that would be for any kind of in-store payment system, right? It seems like a nice, easy fit straight away.
Yeah, and in fact, sort of on the similar vein, Line Artist again, is the latency low enough for NFC style payments, or is this scope for shopping cart processing? Now, my first thought is the NFC style payments is built into sort of the Stripe, the sort of whole Stripe payment process. This is more reacting to things, or am I wrong?
Yeah, I don't actually have the latency on the top of my head, but so I'm not sure about this use case. But this is going to be pretty low latency.
Yeah, but yeah, I wonder. Because I suppose when you the NFC style payments, you're using Apple Pay or Google Pay or that kind of thing. That seems a bit of a separate sort of application flow that's going to be within the Apple Pay ecosystem or the Google Pay ecosystem, which ultimately does the payment. With Stripe as a backend, but then calls to your bank and gets all that authorization. And once that payment has been approved, then an event is generated, or if it's failed, some other kind of event is generated that you can then react on.
Yeah, I think all the best use cases for this are very similar to the serverless way of thinking, right? Where it's asynchronous back-end processing, something that doesn't require immediate responses that can be handled on a kind of pay-per-use spiky traffic workload situation. That's where event-driven architecture is really powerful, right? So anything where it's a longer running asynchronous process is going to be a really good natural fit for something like event destinations.
Yeah. And I suppose the other use cases, slightly separate from the reacting to payments, because we've talked about things like setting up subscriptions or doing a future payment model, or changing your subscription in a month's time, or the spraying out to lots of different things. But they're often, I'm sure there must be lots of scenarios where people want to even just log information or want to track information in their AWS account. Maybe they just want to pump these messages to S3 for long time storage, or they want to batch them up for some sort of analytics and put them into some sort of dashboard, or they want to use into some data warehouse or that kind of thing. And I'm sure Stripe obviously has a way to maintain those events on Stripe side, but if you do want a sort of historical record sitting within your AWS side, I'm sure there must be plenty of use cases of just storing and keeping that raw data around for maybe compliance reasons, or maybe some analytics or some data reason in the future.
Yeah, and sorry, Trey, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna just plus one. You're exactly correct. Stripe has a product called Stripe Data Pipeline, which is for the data warehouse use case, where it's not where we can upload all the Stripe data into your data warehouse. It's not real time though. So for users that need to synchronize their databases with Stripe data in real time, really common with a lot of merchants that need to keep Stripe data about their customers, or and their customers' payment method or their products in line with their own databases. Using event destinations is a really good way to do this in real time.
Okay, cool. And I think just back to, I was thinking about that question before about regions and all that kind of thing. As you mentioned correctly, you would set up an event destination directly to a specific region, but then the world's your oyster. You can very specifically contain all of the messages within a single region, or you've got things like EventBridge's global destinations, and where you can route events literally to any other region in the world. So I know some people can use that for disaster recovery scenarios. You can fail over to another region, or synchronization scenarios, or things like that. So yeah, that was just another example I thought of, using the the EventBridge services to be able to build some availability solutions once you've got the details out of Stripe. One other question I had was, it was in your demo, Ben, about sending messages back to Stripe. So using a Lambda function, is that just the best way that you can sort of, I suppose, formulate the circle that sending events to Stripe to do various kind of things? I don't know if that's payment or that kind of thing, or in fact, what kind of events can you generate in the Stripe side by using a Lambda function? Can you use API destinations to send to Stripe, or what are your options of talking directly to Stripe, not necessarily reacting from the Stripe events?
Yeah, if I wanted to get really clever with it, I could probably cut out Lambda entirely and go step functions first, step functions always, right? Or even, as you say, directly from the EventBridge API connection and call back into Stripe that way. I think not a lot of people know that you can do this from step functions now. You can do this from EventBridge now, and you can have a authenticated call out to a separate API, like something like a Stripe. I think we demoed this at reInvent last year, right? I think Tanya, who was in the chat earlier on, her session demoed calling out to Stripe from step functions. So that's a very very valid way of doing it. I think though the reason I start with Lambda is because I think that's where most people start when they start building with serverless, with microservice on AWS, or at least many people do, right? You just want to throw up some code that can quickly transform an input, run some compute on it, and then invoke another AWS service or call out from AWS into the wider internet. So that's why I use a Lambda function. It's not always the most efficient way of doing something like that if you don't actually need to run any compute, because as you know, with Lambda, you pay for the amount of time your function's running at a given memory configuration, right? So if you don't need to run any compute, you probably should use another service like EventBridge or like step functions, or there's a few others you could use directly. But again, the way that I was doing it in that example in our demo was I was actually updating the payment links page so that after the stock gets down to 0, we call that back into Stripe and we deactivate a payment link and we reactivate a different one so that it swaps out and you can scan a different swag item. I didn't actually demo that part of it. But the way we're doing it is we're just orchestrating all these different objects in Stripe using the Stripe APIs and reacting to the state change of those objects using event destinations.
Okay, so any other use cases you can think of talking back to Stripe? So I know you had the creating a subscription schedule, create an event, and creating an invoice. Just top of hand, any other kind of use cases that you would use some custom compute like Lambda to generate an event on Stripe to do something?
It's anything that Stripe doesn't do out of the box, right? So Stripe is great at processing money, moving money online in various different ways, and there's different levels of customization that Stripe do offer, from something like, let's take payments just for an example, right? Stripe has a whole suite of products, but we'll stick with payments for now. So you can use payment links, which is a completely no-code solution of just creating a page where you can take money online. Then you have things like customized checkout or embedded checkout, or the APIs itself, where you can go further and further along the stack to really customize that user experience. So anything that is beyond those first couple of steps, where you want to really customize the way your users are interacting with Stripe, maybe they don't even know that Stripe's powering your payment systems, then that's where you would start orchestrating the APIs with something like step functions, with something like Lambda, and responding to those updates with EventBridge.
Okay, and just from a business sense as well, I know some people find the whole idea of event-driven architecture is a little sort of bit hard to wrap their head around. For what it's worth, I think Stripe and other kind of partner use cases like this do seem super obvious, and I think people can sort of probably learn what event-driven architectures is because they understand what payment events are generated that you can react to. But for people who maybe not understanding, is any sort of tips and tricks or ways they can think about what kind of how to react to payment events, and how to think about this whole event-driven architecture space as it comes with respect to Stripe?
I would say that the first thing to do is to think of all the different events that your application is going to need to either produce or consume, and that can be from Stripe or to Stripe or nothing to do with Stripe, right? EDA and event-driven architecture in general, you want to get ahead of those events early on. Using something like Event Catalog, which our friend David Boyne has created, right? It's an open source way.
As if by magic.
There he is. There he is. Of course he's there. Hi, Dave.
Hello, Dave.
Lovely open source tool for you to document all your different events that are there in your application. You can connect that directly to your AWS account, and it's great. We've used it for all the different stuff we built together at AWS, and I continue to use it. So that's my first tip, is to use something like Event Catalog to get ahead of documenting your events, to avoid what David calls the big ball of mud, the complexity of your event-driven applications. Because what EDA gives you, or what events give you, is the ability to decouple all these different components in your application, all these different microservices, which is great, but then it becomes really hard to understand how your application is actually held together, right? Because it's become so decoupled, it's really unclear to visualize and understand what's producing and consuming what. So that's why you need a tool like that. The other thing I would say is to make sure you have clear boundaries between your event consumers and your event producers, right? There's a difference between choreography and orchestration, okay? So you want to orchestrate within your microservice boundary and then send events to communicate across those boundaries. That's usually a pretty good rule of thumb. And the third thing I would say is to decide if you're going to use fat events or thin events. So fat events or YOLO events where you've got loads of information about the thing that just happened, perhaps way more than you would need, and thin events where you have maybe just an ID that would point you to a way to retrieve more information. And both can be fine, but you need to decide that early on how your events should look and which types of events you're going to use in your application.
And actually, as we were talking about Dave and event catalog, yeah, Alpa codes. Thanks for bringing this up. That's exactly what I was thinking as well, as talking about event storming, and yeah, also using event catalog as Dave Boyne has created. Yeah, the funny enough, the event storming thing is even not a developer thing. It's not an IT thing. It's actually your developers and your business people talking together to go, did you realize that we actually create a subscription schedule create event or a setup intent created event from Stripe? What can you do with that? And it's actually a very powerful way to be able to get your business people and your technical people to get on the same page, just to know about what events are happening and to be able to react to that. And it's actually a very sort of, I don't want to say bonding experience in a weird kind of way, but a sort of communication experience is probably a much better way to explain it, of using that. So yeah, event storming is super, super powerful, as Alpa Code sends. And then once, as Ben says, once you've got those events, using Dave Boyne's event catalog to document all of the events while they're going around your while they're going around your organization and between your organization as well. Because once the events start flying, they do fly, and you get loads of them. So, Trey, Ben, is there anything else we haven't covered today, or anything we've missed out?
Yes. There's one thing I would like to point people to, and you alluded earlier on that we could be at reInvent later this month, and at reInvent we're holding a breakfast for developers, and I think I gave you the link. Hopefully, you can post that up. So we're hosting a breakfast on Monday morning at Mon Ami Gabi, which is the Paris hotel opposite the Bellagio. And we would love to meet as many developers as possible and chat to you about what you're building, whether that's with Stripe or not. It's just always interested to hear and get feedback out there from what developers are building in real life. So please do RSVP to that. We'd love to speak to you.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So there are obviously lots of cool things going on at reInvent. I think actually Monday morning, that's a good start to get things going. Mon Ami Gabi, I suppose it's a ridiculously early time because this is all things reInvent and all things. But for people who come from Europe, we're going to be up at crazy hours of the morning anyway, so it's perfect. So,
how many talks do you have at reInvent this year?
I have 3 talks and 4 deliveries. So this is the time of year where we're all getting it on. So in fact, I've got to talk at 8 o'clock on the Monday morning. Sorry, not 8, 10 o'clock on the Monday morning. So we'll be straight on in there. Yeah, talking Kafka and Lambda, 8 o'clock on Monday morning. Brilliant. Bring it on.
Perfect.
Cool. Exactly. So Trey, anything else you want to add, or before we close up for today, or what?
I'll drop a link in the chat, but we have a feedback channel called Insiders. It's a forum where if you try our tools and have feedback on our products, want to talk directly to our product teams or engineers, we love to hear feedback so we can improve the product there. So please do try to, if you end up using event destinations, feel free to leave any feedback there, and we'll address them.
Cool. And although obviously we're talking to Stripe today, I think, a lot of the lessons learned about event-driven architectures and interacting with partners, as Ben and Trey have shown really well here, there's so many other different partners that you can interact with as well. And we're seeing amazing, interesting use cases of people, for example, I'm just, thinking of an example here of people getting payment information from Stripe. And then when something goes wrong, it can be routed to, like Zendesk for a ticketing system. And then, come back into AWS and be routed out to some other kind of thing. You can actually build some really cool integrations between a whole bunch of different partners using, EventBridge at AWS to be the sort of backbone, and gather events from all these different partner event buses, send them off from each other. And as you saw, it took Ben a long time to set up that connection. I'm joking, obviously. Seconds to set up that connection, and the events just flow. And I think it's a super interesting way to build applications, and people are, I think, starting to figure it out. It does take some while, but once people do see the benefits, it goes super well. Well, that's from it for today. But we are same time, same place next week, and unbelievably, Lambda is going to be 10 years old in a week and a day's time. So we're having a bit of a celebration with some of the product teams of Lambda, and ECS were both announced at reInvent in 2014. So we're going to have some of the product leadership on. You're going to be able to, you're literally going to be able to ask questions of the people who are building Lambda and building ECS. We're going to do a bit of a retrospective, have some fun, talk about some of the historical kind of things, and yeah, just talk about all the cool things. And we'd love to know all the cool things you've been building with Lambda and ECS over the past 10 years. reinvent.awsevents.com. If you certainly want a breakfast at Monomiga B opposite the Bellagio on a Monday morning, and if not, Ben and I would love to see you there. It's always cool to connect with the community and to see people. And also, please remember serverlessland.com, your sort of one-stop shop for everything serverless related at AWS. Architecture patterns, step functions, workflows, all the kind of things on there. The patterns still keep growing. I think we've got over 850 patterns today. I looked a little bit earlier. Yeah, so people are building new things, and in fact, there's a backlog going on. There are loads more in the hopper queue, which are being all validated, and people are working on. So yeah, patterns are super important, and yeah, we're even looking at expanding patterns and having new patterns and blessed patterns and incorporating them in consoles and IDEs and docs and all these kind of things. So yeah, those patterns are super important. But just want to say thanks so much to Ben and Trey for spending time with us today. Love to hear the story about Stripe. Obviously, Ben and I work together, and yeah, Trey, great to meet you as well. So yeah, love to see how this integration works, and yeah, good luck with working with Stripe. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Julian.
Cheers, everybody. Bye bye.